In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what zones of cardio are the best for fat loss. And we're going to go through zone 1 to zone 5. And so you guys can have a clear understanding of which zone of cardio is the best for fat loss and what substrate of energy you're actually using protein, carbs, and fats. So my name's Adam Muddle. I'm an online fat loss professional, and I've worked with men around the world getting them to elite level shape using metabolic priming, which is a process of metabolism manipulation. We've worked with men from different countries, different walks of life, and we use different zones of cardio in our clients' plans to maximize fat loss and get our clients as lean as possible. So getting right into the video, we're going to start with zone 1 and we're going to go through all the way down to zone 5, and then I'm going to tell you the benefits of each zone of cardio. So zone 1 is very light cardio, 50 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. Walking, light cycling, you should be able to carry on a good conversation with the zone 1 cardio. But the primary fuel source that you optimize for in a zone 1 is actual fat. 85% of the calories you burn in a zone 1 cardio are coming from fat. So let's understand why that is. When you're thinking about substrates of energy, protein, carbs, and fat, the one that is slowest to burn is fat intake, right? And so fat intake has a 9 calorie per gram and a 3% thermic effect, so it burns very slowly. And so when you're at a slower zone of cardio, your body's going to optimize for a slower burning fuel source. So it optimizes for more fat intake. And moving on to zone 2, which is still pretty light, 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. Brisk walking, cycling, swimming, still hold a great conversation, and your body still optimizes for fat intake. 65% of your calories are burned from fat in a zone 2 cardio. And so as you start to go down the zones of cardio, you'll start to notice that the less actual fat that you burn, because the more carbohydrates your body is going to optimize for. Because carbohydrates are a fast-acting fuel source. They're quick to burn. They are highly inflammable within your body. So the higher the zones of cardio you go through, the more carbohydrates that you actually use and the less fat that you actually use. So into zone 3 cardio, which is moderate, 70 to 80% of your maximum heart rate, jogging, strength training, rowing, competitive cycling. This is still high effort, challenging to hold a conversation, but you start to actually optimize a little bit more carbohydrates. So 40% of your calories are now burned from fat, and the body starts to shift toward using carbohydrates as fuel. So it starts to shift a little bit into zone 3. You start to actually burn protein, carbs, and fats in a zone 3, and it's good for general performance and health, and not as good for burning body fat. So when I say good for general performance and health, in zone 3, more of like a strength training context, you start to, 1, build more muscle, which is good for the overall heart, good for overall longevity, and good for overall health markers, because as you start to build more muscle mass, you start to actually be able to absorb more calories. You actually start to increase hormones like testosterone with more muscle mass. So in this zone 3 cardio, you start to burn fuel sources of fats, carbs, and protein. But still, fat is starting to slowly diminish in the substrate of energy they actually use. So moving on to zone 4, which is pretty much your lactate threshold, 80 to 90% of your maximum heart rate. This includes HIIT training, running, power cycling, short bursts of exercise. In this zone of cardio, it's difficult to breathe, right? You get tired very quickly. Your main fuel source starts to become carbs and protein, and you're no longer burning fat for fuel. And so in zone 4, this is where it starts to get a little bit harder. Like the men who primarily do HIIT training for their workouts, they primarily use carbohydrates and protein for fuel and not as much actual fat as a substrate. And then moving on to zone 5, which is the max heart rate, which is really good for athletic training and fast twitch muscle movements at 90 to 100% of your maximum heart rate, athletic training, fast twitch, and in some cases HIIT training, right? So what you have to understand about zones of cardio is that they are different for every person due to your overall cardiovascular health and where you currently are with how shape you are actually in. So within a HIIT training context, you could be at a zone 5 if like you're somebody who is just getting in and you haven't been doing it for some time. But as you start to do these zones of cardio, your heart rate starts to get better because your body starts to adapt and it starts to burn less calories and optimize your cardiovascular health. So in zone 5, carbohydrates are very, very quickly diminished. So let's look at this from an overall higher level context and understand these zones of cardio and which are actually best for burning fat and building muscle. So within zone 1, zone 2, and a little bit of zone 3, your body does burn more fat. It also reduces lactate through blood circulation and stimulates recovery. So at a zone 1 and a zone 2, you're actually stimulating recovery due to increase of just simple blood circulation. So in these case studies that they've done in randomized control trials, continuous exercise but not high intensity interval training improves fat distribution in overweight adults. And in this case study, they found that significantly more abdominal body fat from the same amount of exercise is burned at a zone 1 cardio. And even in this case study, a clinical trial they did on the effect of exercise training at different intensities on fat metabolism of obese men. What they found was at zone 2, fat burning during exercise increases by 40%. So in a zone 2 cardio, you get more efficient at using fat during training. And right here they state, it was concluded that low intensity exercise training in obese subjects seemed to increase fat oxidation during exercise but not at rest. No effect of high intensity exercise training on fat oxidation could be shown. So let's pair the top half of the zones of cardio as well. In the top half zones of cardio, zone 4 and zone 5, you produce more lactate and inflammation. You burn more carbohydrates and it puts you in a deficit very quickly. And within these zones of cardio, improper nutrition leads to a degradation of muscle tissue. So this is where I see most men go wrong, especially in a HIIT training context where people think that HIIT training is a quick, fast way to lose weight quickly. And yes, it is. It will put you in a deficit very quickly. It will diminish a lot of carbohydrates very quickly, and it will help you lose a lot of weight very quickly. But if you're not getting sufficient carbohydrates to fuel your performance and to fuel making sure to sustain the muscle tissue that you have, you will start to actually degrade in muscle tissue. And in a lot of cases, I see men who are in low-carb diets doing HIIT training lose a bunch of weight, but they also lose a bunch of muscle mass with it. And this leads to a very quick relapse of overall weight because once you get down in that weight and you add more food back, you add carbohydrates back, men tend to just gain that weight right back afterwards. So now that we have all the information on the table, so which are the best zones of cardio to actually use to get to an elite level lean physique like all of my clients here? So with our clients, we primarily use zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, right? So zone 1 and zone 2, we use with our clients for overall just a step goal per day. We have our clients stay within 8 to 10K steps per day, so we're reducing lactate, we're improving recovery, and we are maximizing fat oxidation. And when I say fat oxidation, there's multiple ways that actual body fat is actually lost. You have to mobilize the body fat and then actually oxidize the body fat. So the oxidation process comes from a lower intensity state like zone 1 or zone 2. So actually putting a step goal per day in our clients' plans, we're able to properly oxidize that body fat. We're able to properly reduce inflammation. We're properly able to improve blood flow, which stimulates recovery. And then what we do with our clients as well is we pair them with a proper strength training program. So within the strength training program, we're at a zone 3 cardio. But what we're doing is we are still using fats, carbs, and protein for fuel, not as much fat, but what we're doing is we're building a stimulus of the mobilization of body fat. So the mobilization of body fat comes from the stimulus of epinephrine and adrenaline. So within our strength training programs, we add a certain zone 3 stimulus with rest times in between workouts in a strength training context. And so we're building muscle, but we're also reaching that stimulus of epinephrine and adrenaline to properly mobilize body fat. And within this, we start to improve their metabolism by increasing their actual muscle tissue, because the more muscle tissue that you have, not only the leaner that you look, but also the more food you're able to consume, the more carbohydrates you're able to consume and still stay lean. So overall strength training for our clients is good for overall performance and health, but not as good for actual burning body fat. So pairing a strength training program with a zone 2 or zone 1 cardio, we're able to stimulate the mobilization of body fat and the oxidation of body fat. But with this comes proper nutrition, because we do need carbohydrates within our strength training program, so we are not degrading muscle tissue. Because if we're degrading muscle tissue, then we're not increasing performance and we're not improving health. Within the male anatomy, muscle tissue is the most important factor when it comes to longevity, health, testosterone. So we want to make sure to place a good strength training program within their overall profiles, but give them good nutrition so they're getting sufficient carbohydrates in their diet, and we pair them with steps to hit per day so we're properly reducing the lactate from zone 3 cardio, but also improving fat oxidation. So where I see most men go wrong when understanding the zones of cardio is most men's goals are to get to a lean physique, get six-pack shredded, to get to a lower body fat percentage. But if you're using a high-intensity cardio and not properly consuming sufficient carbohydrates, what actually happens? Your body doesn't have sufficient carbohydrates to actually burn, so it reverts back to burning protein, which if we don't have enough protein in our diet, the body reverts back to just burning muscle tissue, which causes a degradation of muscle tissue. So not having proper nutrition in place with a HIIT training and making sure that we're putting a stimulus of reducing lactate and reducing inflammation, what can occur over time is not only a lack of muscle tissue, but a lot more inflammation. Because without carbohydrates at a high intensity cardio state, you start to run into improper reduction of inflammatory responses, which leads to actual lack of body fat being lost. Because if we have high inflammation within the body and we're not eating sufficient carbohydrates to reduce that inflammation, what can happen is the body will restrict itself from actually losing body fat, and you start to even degrade more muscle tissue. So overall, to get to a next level physique, you want to be using a zone 1 or zone 2 paired with a strength training plan. This is going to not only optimize keeping muscle tissue, but also optimize fat oxidation, which will maximize muscle being built, but also maximize fat being lost. So if you like these type of videos, like, comment, and subscribe. We're posting new videos Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the whole purpose of them is to help you guys reaching next level physique and get the information you deserve to get into elite level shape. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn my bell notifications on, because on Friday, I'm going to pull up a client transformation and what exactly I put into his plan to get him into elite level shape using the strategies we've talked about today. So turn the bell notifications on so you can see what this looks like with actual case study involved.